Look behind you. Remember, you are mortal. And remember, you must die. Hi, it's Margaret Meloni, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. As a doula and death literacy advocate, Francesca Arnoldy lives Memento Mori. In fact, she has a casket that she uses as a bookshelf. And on that casket/bookshelf are reminders of people she's loved and still loves, and what she loves about life. We want that kind of balance too. Keep symbolic reminders around us that death will come, but don't overwhelm ourselves. Don't overwhelm yourself. Immerse yourself in the living world too. So live with that ever-present reminder of death, but live. Everyone, today on this special edition of the Death Dhamma Podcast, we have Francesca Arnoldy. And Francesca is a contemplative doula, and she is helping us compassionately and lovingly with transitions. And what I'd like to do now is let Francesca tell you a little bit more about herself. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I've been using the term doula now for 14 years. So first in the birth world, I became a postpartum doula, and then a childbirth educator, and then a labor and birth doula, and did that work very regularly for a handful of years. And then in our personal life, we experienced a number of losses kind of back to back. So we had...
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's difficult.
Yeah, it was a tough couple of years. We had two of my grandfathers died, my father-in-law, and our pet dog.
Oh.
Yeah, and each loss was different and unique. And what they all did, though, together was really open up my mind and heart to wanting to provide support for end of life in addition to beginning of life. And I found myself naturally shifting into my doula presence during the end of life and grief, anticipatory grief. And so I kind of said it out loud or silently or something to the universe, and the fates obliged. And I was able to receive this beautiful invitation to create an end-of-life doula training program.
Yes.
Through just, a series of, it was kismet. And so I said yes to that, became a hospice volunteer.
Oh, nice.
And I do that still kind of when I can fit it into my schedule, and ran this program, and then continued to develop content, to write books, do a guidebook, a picture book. My most recent book out is an interactive workbook, and to give talks and workshops and things, and then to have a small private practice of my own and still balance out the hospice work. And then I'm also a researcher part-time with the Vermont Conversation Lab. And there we've been studying story listening. And during the thick of the pandemic, we ran a study, and it involved doula interventionists who were trained to catch grief stories.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. So you are a very busy woman, and very appreciative of the work you do, because it's very necessary. And as you well know, it is work that not everyone can do, because it can be very emotionally draining. But I know that you have tips about how to make it less so. But it definitely, I believe it takes a special kind of energy. And so I'm appreciative that you're here. And I took a look at your guidebook. This is the Death Doula's Guide to Living Fully and Dying Prepared. And I'm not a death doula, but I still found it to be very helpful.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that. And one of the sections that you talked about in there, which really resonated with me, was your section on Memento Mori. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about like, what does that mean and why is that important?
Sure. I mean, it's a concept and a term that was thought to have started in early Roman times.
Mm-hmm.
And we see depictions of this in art and in stories that were passed down. It would include sometimes a celebrated leader in the military who maybe had just accomplished something in battle, and the town was kind of gathering up to celebrate, and there was a procession, a parade. And so while this person was being celebrated and everyone was gathering and cheering this victory,
Mm-hmm.
there would be an enslaved person right behind the military leader who was whispering a phrase. And I have it in front of me. I'm not going to say it in Latin, but translated, it means, look behind, remember thou art mortal, remember you must die.
Oh,
And the aim of this was to keep that worship leader humble and aware of the transience of glory and existence at large.
That seems so helpful. And I think, obviously I'm in favor of us keeping death in mind in the most positive of ways so that we can channel our energies and make the choices that will help us serve ourselves and others, in this lifetime. But so I really appreciate that, and that they did that. And that also brings in, the idea of impermanence. So here I am, let's say if I'm that Roman leader and I'm out and I'm glorified and I have this amazing career at this time, but there's that person reminding me, like, you're not here forever.
Right.
Yeah. So,
right. It's fleeting. It's not going to last. So that then gives us the opportunity to respond. So how do we respond to that? I mean, it can create fear and discomfort for sure, the reality of our mortality. But it also can create a sense of appreciation and even urgency to make sure that we're completing the work that we feel like we're here to do, that we're treating people and the planet in ways that we feel proud of, that we're sort of working through our issues, anything that we've been kind of dragging along with us that feels unresolved. We're tending to that because we know that, tomorrow isn't promised and we're not going to live forever. So how are we going to spend our time in ways that feel, in ways that feels, we want it to feel meaningful and personally, like we're proud and that we are driven by something that's deeper than just the day-to-day sort of one foot in front of the other, the grind, and we're walking around sort of like we're half awake, half asleep.
yes, I think that's I love that description, half awake, half asleep. It is true. And, some of us will have an experience in life that wakes us up and we'll realize, and some of us may not. And that's how it goes. And then, so I'm curious, how do you help your doulas and others, right, to move past that initial feeling of fear? Because you're right. I think when we first start thinking, this is impermanent, I am going to die, there can be that moment of panic. But I feel like we need to move past that moment of panic to really be fully in this world and be helping others. And so how would you help someone move past that moment of panic?
I do cover this pretty comprehensively in the book, and there are quite a few different prompts and exercises, but in general, it's really about our own pacing, being really respectful of all of the emotion that will naturally arise. So not forcing ourselves to just find quickly a place of acceptance and to feel positively about it all. But that's not the true goal of mortality awareness work, that it's really about allowing ourselves to be honest and to be gentle, and then to still, work with it, work through it, and see what happens. So with Memento Mori, I encourage people to think about having some symbolic reminders that can either visually cue them or in other ways cue and remind them of their mortality. So for example, in my home office, I have a beautiful, simple wooden casket made by Fiddlehead Caskets. And it's a bookshelf right now, but then it will convert to be a simple casket for when it's called to its final duty for me. And on its shelves, I have a number of visual reminders. So the whole thing is a memento mori symbolic reminder for me. But then in its shelves, I have very intentionally, mindfully chosen items, and it includes pictures of beloved family members who are alive and not. It includes books that are very special to me, memories from my own childhood. It has some of the artwork and gifts that I've given to people as they have been dying and that have been returned to me afterward. It has my vision board. So as I think about dreaming up my year, it has gifts from learners and clients, and it has my death journal in it, which is the main inspiration for this new interactive workbook that just recently published. And so all of those together are reminders, but I also encourage people to not overwhelm themselves with this. You know, you also need to come up for air, you need to take a breath, and you need to be able to fully immerse yourself in the actual living of life, which is hopefully what the reminder does, but you kind of can't stay stuck in that place of just thinking about your own death and just thinking about your mortality. It's this balancing act of acknowledging that reality and then living as fully as you possibly can.
So the balance. So first of all, I want to say your bookshelf sounds really pretty and amazing. And I'm really appreciative of the idea of taking this casket and having it ever present and using it for life. And then eventually it will be used for death.
Yes.
But you're now bringing up a really important point in Buddhism. We might talk about equanimity, some balance of not getting carried away with the emotions of it. And so we want to live with this ever-present reminder, but I guess the key is we want to live. And if I'm whispering memento mori to myself all day long, I might not be using it appropriately. I might not be able to live. And the point is to, I feel like, push me, motivate me to live fully. Is it fair to say that?
Yes, to engage, to be present.
And so you're training these, you're training doulas and you're helping other people and you're in hospice and you're helping people and families. And so how do you help people in that moment to become more fully accepting of death if they aren't? Now, some people are in hospice, they get it, they're ready, their families get it, they're ready. But my observation has been that, some people really resist until their body just gives out. And so how do you help those who are really resistant?
It's definitely a challenge. I mean, sometimes in my work as a doula, private practice, in general, people who are familiar with what I'm offering, they're in general more open to it. And so they're more accepting of, okay, yes, this is my diagnosis, this is my prognosis, and I want to spend my time in ways, with some intention there. And so they tend to be more open. People, when I'm a hospice volunteer, it does depend. Some people aren't very open to having those conversations, and I'm never forceful, I'm never pushy about it. The door's always open. And so I really, as a sign of respect, I try to adopt and utilize their language that they use, because sometimes people aren't ready to use the words death and dying or even cancer. And so I try to really listen to see where they're at. And then I present myself as somebody who's not going to shy away from difficult conversations. So often if somebody's ready to disclose something, they'll sort of inch forward and they'll test you out. And if you as a listener are going to minimize what they're saying, if you're going to try to immediately look on the bright side, if you're going to try to overlay your own stories or meaning on top of what they're experiencing, and you're going to try to say things like, at least this, or look at it this way, that is absolutely not what I would do as a doula. So I would take a step back. I would utilize and lean on silence a lot more than responding and verbalizing. And I would be very invitational. If they want to go there, I am happy to accompany them. I'm not going to have their answers. I'm not going to be able to solve their problems or fix whatever they're facing, but I will make sure that they don't feel alone in it. And so in that way, if I continue to sort of prove that to people, then they will usually find themselves at some point feeling ready to have a conversation with more depth about their impending death. Now, sometimes that will happen away from the ears of their loved ones, because sometimes people will try to spare one another those conversations. And I totally understand that. But once somebody has said it aloud to me, because I feel like a safe sort of landing for them, then they will sometimes then develop the confidence and the courage to be able to have conversations with other people who are closer to them, who will be more directly affected.
I think that invitational approach is so helpful, because I think, as you're teaching this to us, and I'm thinking of different scenarios of, being in the room with someone who is dying, and that, yes, sometimes in that room, there's someone who's not ready to accept the fact that this person they love is dying. And so they may go to that place of, you have to try harder, or you're going to be fine, or just think positively. And, the truth is, like, we're all going to die. And so at some point, trying harder and thinking positively isn't going to change the fact that I am a human in a human body, and it's going to end,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it's the way that they're trying to demonstrate their love.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to view it with that kind of kindness is helpful, but then offering alternative ways that they can continue to demonstrate their love even through the dying process can be really helpful. This is the same in birth as well. When people are responding in fear and they don't want to witness their person suffering, and because it's hard work, and it can be hard work to leave your body as well, or it can be hard work on a number of levels, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically. And so when we're witnessing that kind of intensity, sometimes it makes us feel very helpless. So as a doula, what I try to offer are ideas, and while also honoring the comfort level of each person and how close they feel like they want to be to the epicenter of what's happening. And then for me, being able to kind of step forward or step back in accordance to that.
That makes sense. I was speaking with someone a while back, and she was mentioning that the dying process can be similar to the birthing process. And, so there's the doula that's helping with birth, and then there's the doula that's helping with death. And you've been both of these things. And I really thought about what she said. And, in Buddhism, there's the teaching that, about the different kinds of suffering, and, birth is suffering, because we're coming back again, but it's also obviously very difficult for the person giving birth, but it's also difficult for the baby. We just don't always know that because they communicate differently. And dying can be difficult as well. And so they're both these forms of suffering. And I was just struck by the fact that made sense, but that also not every person in our population has had that first experience of giving birth. And I wonder, do you feel like if someone has had that experience of giving birth, that it can later in life prepare for death? Or I guess what I'm really asking is, do you see similarities here, and help me navigate what I'm trying to think about here?
I definitely see similarities. I think that when you are able to, this could be kind of a loaded word for some people, but when you're able to surrender into a process that's very natural and human, like giving birth or like dying, then it can be incredibly powerful. And it can, you can feel very empowered by that, because you are connecting directly to what's happening versus sort of fighting against it and feeling victimized by what's happening. Now, in birth, there's a range of ways that we navigate birth as birthing people. And so, some people decide they kind of want to be as detached from it as possible and as numbed out and medicated. And I'm not passing judgment there. And then there are other people who want to be very fully aware and present and in their bodies and experiencing everything that birth is able to hand over to them, and then anything in between. And I think that it's pretty similar for end of life as well. Some people, because of a variety of reasons, their preference is to be as detached from it as possible and to be as maybe perhaps sedated and comfortable. And then other people who are on the other extreme there, who want to feel whatever death has to offer to them. And they feel like that's a really important learning process on whatever level. Now, as a witness to these experiences, I mean, it's incredibly awe-inspiring, and I learn so much. And every time I'm able to attend a birth with somebody, or I'm able to support somebody through their preparations for the end of life, or through even the grieving process, I feel like the more I witness, the more it expands the realm of possibility. And so it does become harder to teach because it's so expansive.
Yes.
Yet I do think that by sharing our stories and anecdotes, and by going through a series of questions and prompts that are introspective and that are generative in terms of creating our wishes for care, we can create this sense of empowerment, and we can go in more informed, and then we're not usually as frightened in the moment. Fear still comes up, definitely, in any intense situation. If you have somebody by your side who's going to remain calm and grounded and centered through that, and sort of walk you through those waves that you will definitely face, then you tend to feel like, I can do this. I can get myself through this. I can see myself through this. And it is expected, and it's natural, and it's part of being human. And I have all that I need within me and around me
to do this thing. And, that phrase that you used, surrendering to the process, that's so key in so many elements of our lives. We happen to be, focusing on a couple of specific things here, but that's surrendering to the process, because sometimes many of us, we want to really just control something. It's in many of us, it's our natural, unnatural way of being is what I'm going to call it. That illusion of control. I can control this. And so I see the value of, if I'm the person who's dying, when I surrender to the process, I may still have physical pain, but I'm going to have less mental pain. And that's going to make it easier. And if my people who are with me surrender to the process, then even though they're going to be sad when I'm gone, they're going to be able to go through it and support one another and support me more fully. And then, if there's a doula in the room, or, the staff, whomever is helping us, but that person also needs to surrender to the process. And that's a lot of people really learning how to be with what's happening in the moment in order to have, I'll say, the best possible peaceful death, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we definitely have a ways to go. And I think part of it is our unfamiliarity with death. We've outsourced it largely. I mean, it used to happen usually in the home, and the care people would come into the home, and we would see our own loved ones through the dying process, and we would bury them ourselves. And so we knew it, we saw it, we were raised witnessing it, and we learned from older generations, and that's really not the case anymore. So part of this rehumanizing the end of life is about remembering the end of life, remembering what it is to die, and how our bodies do it, and what is natural and healthy, and then what are cues and signs that more support would be beneficial. And there's so much learning and remembering that we need to do.
We really have. We've tried, and I'm going to say, from a Western perspective, we have really tried to sanitize death. We have, you're right, we have removed ourselves from it. We don't always see it. We maybe see depending on the choices we make, we might see a pretty corpse, and then we'll say, oh, she looks just like she did, or, oh my gosh, look, they made her look even better. And so we've really kind of sanitized and taken away being part of those steps. And each of those steps, while difficult, each of those steps would help us really have some comfort and acceptance of this. And I think that if we got back into that, if we didn't sanitize death and the process of death, then we would be able to be Memento Mori.
Right. It would be more naturally and organically part of our lives again. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we think about looking for the perfect death, just in the same way as people who are pregnant are hopeful for the perfect birth. You can surround yourself with compassionate support, and that is huge. You can prepare yourself, and you can learn, and you can hear stories, and you can think about your own needs in advance and ways that you can express that. especially for moments when you're not going to be able to verbalize them yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as a doula, I feel an obligation to best prepare people by saying we need to be flexible. We need to be agile. We need to be able to meet each moment and do that with honesty. And so I don't want to think that you are guaranteed any particular pathway in your birth or your death, but you will be companioned and you will have the tools and resources that we can, come up with ahead of time and in the moment, so that we can create the kind of experience that you will hopefully feel safe and comforted and honored and have what you need throughout.
There you go. And what do you think is the most important thing when you look at someone who comes to you to be a doula, because you're helping people become doulas? What do you look for in order to, I'll say, welcome somebody into the program?
Well, I teach in a variety of ways. I do think so. I have two bigger thoughts about this. I feel like the table is very large and it's growing. And I think that this is human work. I don't think that it's any one particular type of person or someone with a particular skill set or background that is a prerequisite to becoming a doula or someone who's working in death care in this capacity on the sort of emotional support level. I think that it's a big, huge table and there are spaces for lots of people. One red flag that I see sometimes is when people are very driven by their own personal experience of loss. And that does bring a lot of us to this work, myself included.
Me too.
But we have to be very mindful of, how wounded are we currently and how healed are we currently? And so what kind of capacity do we really have to offer care to other people? So it does require a very honest reflection of where am I at in my healing journey with the losses that I have experienced, because it can really activate things when you're in the middle of chaos and intensity and you really haven't looked at your own losses and really tried to heal them. So that is one sort of caution that I put out there to people. It doesn't mean that no one's ever 100% fully healed and ready to go. It's an evolution and life is a process in flux, of course. And you will have times probably where you feel like you have less bandwidth and less capacity. And so just being honest with yourself about that. So before you offer your care to other people, I think is really important. But otherwise, it's really a dedication to compassion, and it's really a willingness to be open to allowing enough space so that our clients or loved ones, family members, whoever we're supporting, so that they can determine their best path. And it's not that we are setting out, this is the way it's done, and we have a protocol and we have steps that people take and that might not fit with who they are and their values and what they're looking for.
It resonates so deeply. I know I don't act as a doula, at least not officially. I've certainly, helped in a couple of different cases with family and friends. And then maybe I've done more help afterwards with some other women that were widowed. And I learned one day, I had this aha moment that I had to let go of how I thought they should be acting in their widowhood, and just realize this is the experience for them, and either I can help or I can't. But I don't want to be like, well, at this point, she should be doing this or she should do that, because there's no should. And so you're right. I had to really look at myself and go, oh, okay, so this is where you are. And I had to acknowledge where I was in order to really be truly helpful.
Yes, right. There's a lot of introspection and assessment. And this new workbook, the Death Doula's Guide, is all of my doula bag poured into pages. And so I can offer that up to people who as individuals want to work through this, or also to death care providers as a tool so they can look at, let's work through this exercise this week, and here's another idea. But I always encourage people who are considering going into death care or any sort of helping field that they go through the process first. So as a prerequisite, if there's going to be one, you complete the exercises, you do the prep work, and also acknowledging that if you're in decent health, if you are not facing a terminal diagnosis, if you're not enduring that right now, that you're going to be in a different headspace than the person who is actually terminally ill. So you have to be able to differentiate that. But still, it's very valuable to do our own work first. We have to turn inward first before we extend that care outward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really felt that going through your guide and looking at the different sections and the topics and the exercises, I really saw you helping the reader, the participant, to really work through and be comfortable with these different elements, whether it was just in their own personal lives or to make them, I'll say, stronger in their role as doula, because I have learned from others that since every death is unique, that if you're the one they're helping, they are going to land differently with you. They will land differently with you. And that's based on where you are at that moment and what you've experienced in your life. And maybe this person reminds you of someone you know, or you had a similar experience and it's surfacing while you're helping someone through theirs. And so there's a lot to think about, right?
Right. And that's so natural and it will happen. It is inevitable. And so we can be poised to recognize that when we're activated. And then it's like this little ding in the back of our head. And we tell ourselves, okay, I hear you. I see that that's happening and I'm going to tuck it aside for now. And then we need to attend to it outside of our visits. So we can't just brush it aside. You can't pretend it away because it will creep back up and usually more loudly the next time. And so we have to continue to check in with ourselves and do that work so that we can come to clarity about what is mine. Okay, this is mine. And I'm going to actually explore it and work on healing. And then what is theirs? And then when there's more clarity between the two, everyone does better.
And it's an ongoing process. Like, I'm not going to go through your guide and then be like, okay, I'm good. I'm done now.
Right.
I'm going to revisit sections.
Absolutely.
I'm going to revisit sections. This is really helpful. Now, I'm just curious, is there something that you would like to be able to share that we haven't touched upon yet?
Well, I mentioned my death journal briefly, and I can see it there on my bookshelf. And that was the original inspiration for the book. And my death journal is a scrapbook that I have been creating for many years for my loved ones for my time of death, whenever that will occur. And I really hope to encourage other people to think about creating their own death journal. And so I take them through prompts in this workbook and beyond even what I've covered in my own death journal. And it becomes this opportunity to think about our own lives, to reflect back, to reminisce, and to kind of compile life stories, but also messages and notes to our loved ones and my hopes for them. And so they know where it is, they know where it lives. And it's not like I don't have these types of conversations with my loved ones. We do. So they hear these messages, but also I've created a place where they can go and they can find my voice and they can find my love and my essence there on the page for when they're missing me. So even in my absence, I will be able to comfort them. And I feel like as a mom, personally for myself, knowing that I'm leaving behind my loved ones, I imagine my end of days, whenever that might be, that will be my biggest anchor to this body, to this lifetime. And it will be the hardest to detach from. But knowing that I have created this gift for them, that they will be able to access when they're, deeply grieving me and our connection, that will allow me to surrender into the mystery of my dying with a little more ease, I hope. And it will provide them with a tool for coping in the mourning period. So I'm really trying to inspire more people, ideally kind of earlier on, before you are maybe facing life-limiting conditions, to consider creating your own death journal.
That is an amazing suggestion. And I want to second and third it and fourth it. Now I'm schizophrenic, everyone. And the reason I want to say that is because I have two, not exactly like what you're saying, but I have two journals, one from each parent. And it came pre-printed. So I like the idea of do your own. It came pre-printed. And so they answered different questions about their lives. And so and I didn't read them until after they died. And it was so helpful because I learned so much. And yet I will sometimes still find myself wishing that I could call like my uncle and ask him about a family story or suffering. And so the more that you can do that, the more it helps people when they're left behind. So thank you so much for that idea of the death journal. It's really important. And I sit here as someone who has not done hers. And so there you go. So it's
you are officially invited.
Yes, exactly. So it's a reminder to all of us. And if we do it now, like if I did it now, I'm just sitting here now. I mean, we don't know. Well, again, Memento Mori, we don't know when my day will come. But if I just worked on it today as something fun and not because I'm going to die, what a nice record, family history record in a more joyful way that could be. So thank you so much. And before I have to say goodbye for the day, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with?
You can find me at francescaarnoldy.com, and I hope to continue the conversation and to thank you, Margaret, for the good work that you're doing in the world.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for being here.
I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmeloni.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Meloni. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmeloni.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.